Hey, there we are. What's good, everybody? It is Zerilath, and we are here for another Martin Heidegger run. I'm playing with my makeup again. How do I look? I know my line work is god awful. God awful. I did okay on the horn, though, but it's smudging off because this was just a test run. I gotta get good at some level of engraving or something. Oh, man, look at the old me. Look at how much I'm coming along. Woo! Oh, man, and I spent the time in the gym today. Oh, boy, did I spend the time in the gym. Whew. So, there we are. We're good. So, we're going to be listening to Once More Round the Sun, the Mastodon album, during breaks. We'll see how many breaks I take. It's usually 3. And we're going to move through now from chapter 36. We got about 60 of these altogether, so there's like 30-something. There's like about 30 or so more to go. All right? So, bang, here we are. Let's get our German on. 36. Curiosity. In our analysis of understanding and of the disclosedness of the there in general, we have alluded to the lumen naturale and designated the disclosedness of being in as Dasein's clearing, in which it first becomes possible to have something like sight. And then it just says CH 133 above, so it's not necessary context. Our conception of sight has been gained by looking at the basic kind of disclosure, which is characteristic of Dasein, namely understanding in the sense of the genuine appropriation of those entities towards which Dasein can comport itself in accordance with its essential possibilities of being. The basic state of sight shows itself in a peculiar tendency of being which belongs to everydayness, the tendency towards seeing. We designate this tendency by the term curiosity, nouger, which characteristically is not confined to seeing, but expresses the tendency towards a peculiar way of letting the world be encountered by us in perception. Right. It's about what we let into our field, right? Curiosity. It's the difference between walking down the street every single day and just tunnel vision straight ahead versus walking down the street every day and looking left and right and behind you all the time to catch all the angles out of no other reason than a desire to expand awareness. And that's kind of the base, I would say that's the base primordial understanding of curiosity. Let's see what Heidegger has to say about it. Our aim in interpreting this phenomenon is in principle one which is existential ontological. We do not restrict ourselves to an orientation towards cognition, even at an early date. And in Greek philosophy, this was no accident. Cognition was conceived in terms of the desire to see. So desire to see, nicht in der Verringten Orientierung am Erkennen, das schon früh und in der griechischen Philosophie nicht zulässig aus der Lust zu sehen, begriffen wird. The earlier editions have am Erkennen as welches schon früh. All right. That was not very helpful, but I kind of enjoyed reading that. All right. The treatise, which stands first in the collection of Aristotle's treatise on ontology, begins with the sentence there that I cannot read. And the care for seeing is essential to man's being, right? So, like all these various footnotes, I will probably look into these in my own private time when I'm done with the book, right? This is me in my, downtime, getting to this, doing this, and just part of my more comfortable learning process, right? Like almost like this is the way I read the book as a first pass. It's kind of goes hand in hand with just my style of thinking, which might be a little bit impatient, right? But it's just me dealing with how I am and who I am, and what this means to me in context of the entirety of my time when I'm not on the internet, right? Because I have to get all sorts of shit together on the back end before I can make this endeavor primary, because I am far too controversial for the algorithms and for the censors to go into that level of successful viewership, right? Unless some miracle happens and I get shared around all the right networks, which that doesn't happen. And certainly me sharing myself around the networks does nothing for me. I pop this fucking shit in to all my Telegram feeds, and nobody gets to it in real time ever. I don't get the luck. I'm not exciting enough for everybody to stop what they're doing. I am somebody you tune into when you're interested in sitting down and taking notes, right? This is me trying to run an intelligence for you. So this remark, So the care for seeing is essential to man's being. And so then it says down here, while the sentence from Aristotle is usually translated, all men by nature desire to know, Heidegger takes that particular word in its root meaning, to see, and connects to this particular word, to literally reach out for, with sorge, care. Reach out for with care. Interesting. I think I understand how that functions. All right. This remark introduces an investigation in which Aristotle seeks to uncover the source of all learned exploration of entities and their being by deriving it from that species of Daseins being which we have just mentioned. This Greek interpretation of the existential genesis of science is not accidental. It brings to explicit understanding what has already been sketched out beforehand in the principle of Parmenides. Then it goes into another Greek term, which has an annotation. This sentence has been variously interpreted. The most usual version is, for thinking and being are the same. Heidegger, however, goes back to the original meaning of that word as to perceive with the eyes. Interesting. And I find it interesting that to perceive with the eyes gets a little bit more literal. For thinking and being are the same, and to perceive with the eyes, those are vastly different meanings. It's very interesting that you get such widely different translations. And when did it become for thinking and being are the same, right? Why did Heidegger have to go all the way back, right? What's missing? And, was there something wrong with people who translated it for thinking and being are the same, right? Because here is Heidegger drawing a different translated conclusion to this in order to suit the points that he is making for his piece here, right? So somebody who would know the Greek best, perhaps someone like Dr. Hillman over there at Lady Babylon, who's the Greekosaurus Rex. See, I just called him the king of the Greeks, didn't I? But anyway, but one has to leave it at, is Heidegger being manipulative? Is the context correct? As he lust of the eyes for, I'm sorry. Lust of the eyes. Where do we get to that point? Let's find out what's going on here. All right. This remark introduces an investigation which Aristotle seeks to uncover the source of all learned exploration of entities and their being, by deriving it from that species of Dasein's being which we have just mentioned. This Greek interpretation of the existential genesis of science is not accidental. It brings to explicit understanding what has already been sketched out beforehand in the principle of Parmenides. And so now we get to the third. Oh, wait, did I already read that? No, I did. I'm sorry. I jumped all the way back to 2. I forgot we were at 3. And anyway, being is that which shows itself in the pure perception which belongs to beholding, and only by such seeing does being get discovered. Primordial and genuine truth lies in pure beholding. This thesis has remained the foundation of Western philosophy ever since. The Hegelian dialectic found in it its motivating. I'm very sorry for coughing in your ear. These things, they jump at me so fast, the cough, when I'm in real time like this. And you just, I just can't sit there with my finger on the button just because my throat's a little dry, because usually I don't cough. So forgive me in this very live, real-time, rink-a-dink production that I got going on over here. For all of you that care, all 0 of you in my chat room. Anyway, being is that which shows itself in pure perception. Okay, I'm sorry, I read that. Beholding this thesis, da-da-da. Right, motivating conception, and is possible only on the basis of it. The remarkable priority of seeing was noticed particularly by Augustine in connection with his interpretation of concupiscencia. Concupiscencia. Ad oculus inem vider proprae pertine. Or pertinet. I don't know if the T is hard or soft over there. That's what she said. Anyway, seeing belongs properly to the eyes. Utimar autem hoc verbo etiam in ceteris sensibus cum ios ad cognoscentum intendimus. But we even use this word, seeing, for the other senses when we devote them to cognizing. Nec inem dicimus audi quid rutile Ulf ac quam nitiat, ot gusta quam splendiat, ot pelpa quam fulgat, videri in enim dicunter haec omnia. For we do not say hear how it glows, or smell how it glistens, or taste how it shines, or feel how it flashes, but we say of each, see. We say that all this is seen. Interesting. See how it glows, see how it glistens, see how it shines, see how it flashes. Right. That is kind of the way that we say it. I've noticed. Let's see. But we say sees. Okay, so seen dissimos autem non solum vid quid luquiat quod soli oculi scintire possunt. We not only say see how that shines when the eye alone can perceive it. Sed etiam vad quid sone, vad quid oleat, vad quis sapiat, vad quam durum sit. But we even say, see how that sounds, see how that is scented, see how that tastes, see how hard that is. Right. But this is the right, but you still aren't using your eyes to get those senses, right? Which is why there may be a poetically correct precedent for using the word see. And so it's a question of why do we choose to use the more poetic sense of seeing it, right? Which is about perceiving. It's because we're using seeing in the context of perceiving, yet we're trying to literalize it as we can see a taste. I mean, we can make the joke that if you take a really excellent picture of a really well-prepared plate of food, that I can practically taste it just by looking at it. My mouth will water just by seeing it, especially if it's a video, right, where I can watch steam rising and you can catch the glistening of the glaze in a way that a still photo doesn't quite capture. Like, that's different, right? So see how it tastes, see how hard it is. Right, okay. So adioc generalis experientia sensum concupiscentia sicut dictum est oculorum vacatur qua videndi officium in quo primetum oculi tenent etiam ceteri sensusivi de similitudin usurpent cum aliqui cognitionis explorant. Therefore, the experience of the senses in general is designated as lust of the eyes, for when the issue is one of knowing something the other senses by a certain resemblance take to themselves the function of seeing, a function in which the eyes have priority. What is to be said about this tendency just to perceive? Which existential state of Dasein will become intelligible in the phenomenon of curiosity? Being in the world is proximately absorbed in the world of concern. This concern is guided by circumspection, which discovers the ready to hand and preserves it as thus discovered. Right, concern and curiosity. Think of everybody's favorite movie to argue about its influence on society is They Live, John Carpenter's They Live. John Nada, I think was Roddy Piper's name. Nada, the suggestion that he is the non-person, the non-man, like just the guy, the irrelevant man. And he could have stayed as an outsider to things, could have sat there and allowed these tyrants of the rising neoconservative movement, because this John Carpenter has said that Reaganomics, neoconservatism is or it wasn't known as neoconservatism precisely back then, because they had maybe they did. I'm not sure. It'd been percolating since the 70s, so could have been. But my point is that he could have just turned a blind eye to the abuse of the underclass that was going on, right? He could have just kept to himself. He knew how to take care of himself. The destruction of the homeless camp that he was finding shelter in. He would have found shelter by other means. He was already a person accustomed to wandering. He's like the fool card, wandering in a certain sense, taking on the role of the hermit, where he, through his concern, he's holding that lamp in the darkness, right? That curiosity to look into the unknown. And he's looking into the unknown because something from the unknown came out and showed a hostility that did not sit right with him, a basic sense of humanity. And he felt inclined to want to do something about it, right? Because he has compassion and empathy for the people around him who are not criminal people. They're just struggling, going through a hard time. None of them are people that don't want to work, right? It's this kind of scenario, right? And you, as the audience in that movie, you want him to pursue that curiosity. Otherwise, there's no fucking movie. Because Mr. Nana would stay a completely irrelevant man. Okay, what is it to be said about this tendency just to perceive? Which existential state of Dasein... Oh, I'm sorry, I read that already. This concern is guided circumspection, right? That's where we are? This concern is guided by circumspection, which discovers the ready to hand and preserves it as thus discovered. Whenever we have something to contribute or perform, circumspection gives us the route for proceeding with it, the means of carrying it out, the right opportunity, the appropriate moment. Concern may come to rest in the sense of one's interrupting the performance and taking a rest. Or it can do so by getting it finished. In rest, concern does not disappear. Circumspection, however, becomes free and is no longer bound to the world of work. When we take a rest, care subsides into circumspection, which has been set free. In the world of work, circumspective discovering has redissevering as the character of its being. When circumspection has been set free, there is no longer anything ready to hand which we must concern ourselves with bringing close, but as essentially disseverant. This circumspection provides itself with new possibilities of dissevering. Circumspections and dissevering is making my mind think of horrible things. But anyway, this means that it tends away from what is most closely ready to hand and into a far and alien world. Care becomes concerned with the possibilities of seeing the world merely as it looks while one tarries and takes a rest. Dasein seeks what is far away simply in order to bring it close to itself in the way it looks. Dasein lets itself be carried along, mitnehmen, solely by the looks of the world in this kind of being. It concerns itself with becoming rid of itself as being in the world, and rid of itself being alongside that which is the closest everyday manner is ready to hand. When curiosity has become free, however, it concerns itself with seeing, not in order to understand what is seen, that is to come into being towards it, but just in order to see. It seeks novelty only in order to leap from it anew to another novelty. In this kind of seeing, that which is an issue for care does not lie in grasping something and being knowingly in the truth. It lies rather in its possibilities of abandoning itself to the world. Therefore, curiosity is characterized by a specific way of not tarrying alongside what is closest. Consequently, it does not seek the leisure of tarrying observantly, but rather seeks restlessness, and the excitement of continual novelty and changing encounters. In not tarrying, curiosity is concerned with the constant possibility of distraction. Curiosity has nothing to do with observing entities and marveling at them. Then there's a Greek term that I don't know. To be amazed to the point of not understanding is something in which it has no interest. Rather, it concerns itself with a kind of knowing, but just in order to have known. Both this not tarrying in the environment with which one concerns oneself and this distraction by new possibilities are constitutive items for curiosity, and and upon these is founded the third essential characteristic of this phenomenon, which we call the character of never dwelling anywhere. Aufenthaltslosigkeit. Curiosity is everywhere and nowhere. This mode of being in the world reveals a new kind of being of everyday Dasein, a kind in which Dasein is constantly uprooting itself. Interesting. Idle talk controls even the ways in which one may be curious. It says what one must have read and seen. It being everywhere and nowhere, curiosity is delivered over to idle talk. Oh yes, this is when you're at work, and this is the water cooler conversation bullshit. Nobody wants to talk about anything that matters, so somebody wants to talk about the fucking weather. They want to talk about the fucking game because everything else is going to upset somebody in the fucking room. Women, primarily. Because men want to talk about the history of something happening right now that they have a problem with, and women don't want to hear it, that it's a problem and you're just a terrible person for pointing out your issues with it, and that's your problem, not their problem, yada, 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 without taking the time to listen, and to listen long and careful at the character of the person bringing up the problem, how he's framing it, and what he's trying to propose be done about it, or at least what is he proposing is the problem source, etc., etc., and all the different things that all of that conversation means. And I guess people probably just simply think that they got pretty good wits about them or something, and then they'll make their judgment and it's done, right? I have lost colleagues, friends, respect left and right for every little fucking choice I make. And you know what? I kind of like it. I kind of like the fact that nobody wants to fucking watch me with my shirt off, and nobody wants to watch me read Martin Heidegger and then rant about it. What? Because all I'm doing is showing off, and nobody likes to show off, even though I am showing off not just my intelligence, but why my intelligence matters. Or you just admit that I'm stupid. Make the argument that I am stupid, that I am a fool. Please, I am begging you to troll me with the truth about me. Please, write it down. I will have to read it in order to remove it. So put something down for me to remove. I probably won't even remove it. I may even challenge you if I think that you're wrong about me. All right? Because I don't know who's going to be still my friend tomorrow. I am pretty damn sure that Ryder fucking Lee didn't like something that I said, and he fucking blocked me on Facebook. I'm pretty fucking sure that happened. Unless he got his Facebook account removed. But I'm pretty sure that's what happened. I can't contact Jay Widener anymore. I don't hear from any of those people. Those people don't like me. I don't think R. Wayne Steiger likes me anymore. He never fucking gets a hold of me. I don't think any of these people fucking like me at all. Nobody checks in. Nobody says Merry Christmas. Nobody says nothing. Okay? I used to put in a lot of effort with people that I loved and respected, but I am too much, and I am too much of a heretic and too much of a blasphemer for everybody. You can call me Loki, you can call me Odin. I don't give a fuck. Because I stopped trying to figure out how to get anybody's fucking approval anymore. All I know is I navigate the real world just fine, and I don't need a fucking dime from the internet. Let me find out how much further we have to go on. Oh, okay, we're at the end. Good. I'm going to take a break in a moment. Idle talk controls even the ways in which one may be curious. It says what one must have read and seen. Okay, I'm sorry, I read all that. These two everyday modes of being for disclosure and sight are not just present at hand, side by side in their tendency to uproot, but either of these ways to be drags the other one with curiosity, the other one with it. Curiosity, for which nothing is closed off, and idle talk, for which there is nothing that is not understood, provide themselves, that is the Dasein which is in this manner, dem sociandan Dasein, with the guarantee of a life which supposedly is genuinely lively. But with this supposition, a third phenomenon now shows itself, by which the disclosedness of everyday Dasein is characterized. So when we get back from the break, we're going to cover ambiguity. Oh, this will be interesting. Can't wait to get all ambiguous. All right. Let's get our mastode on. See what I did there? are. Boom. Welcome back, everybody. Oh, the motherlode. They, Mastodon, made, you ever watch Mastodon music videos? I mean, there's something special about Mastodon music videos, man. They're really fucking intelligent music videos. Most of them. And the Motherlode is one of those music videos they made that is, it's just funny. Like, sometimes it's just funny, right? It's that particular song, not necessarily an intelligent music video, other than the context of the times that it was made and what it meant to the generation and, of their fans at that time. It's still, it's great. It's booties. It's lots of booties. But the song we're going to play in the next break, High Road. Oh, that one's, the music video for that one is, let's just say I've got that little nerd in me, and the High Road is just a nerd anthem. But anyway, let's get into the ambiguity of a thing. The ambiguity tie 37 in a row. When, in our everyday being with one another, we encounter the sort of thing which is accessible to everyone and about which anyone can say anything, it soon becomes impossible to decide what is disclosed in a genuine understanding and what is not. This ambiguity, Zweidhütigkeit, extends not only to the world, but just as much to being with one another as such, and even to Dasein's being towards itself. Everything looks as if it were genuinely understood, genuinely taken hold of, genuinely spoken, though at bottom it is not, or else it does not look so, and yet at bottom it is. Ambiguity. Let me pronounce that seriously now. Ambiguity not only affects the way we avail ourselves of what is accessible for use and enjoyment and the way we manage it. Ambiguity has already established itself in the understanding as a potentiality for being, and in the way Dasein projects itself and presents itself with possibilities. All right, don't have to worry about these annotations. Everyone is acquainted with what is up for discussion and what occurs, and everyone discusses it, but everyone also knows already how to talk about what has to happen first and about what is not yet up for discussion, but really must be done. Already, everyone has surmised and sent it out in advance what others have also surmised and sent it out. This being on the scent is, of course, based upon hearsay. For if anyone is genuinely on the scent of anything, he does not speak about it. And this is the most entangling way in which ambiguity presents Dasein's possibilities, so that they will already be stifled in their power. Oh, before I comment, let's find out what's going on with that last term. Ist die verfänglich wies in der die Zweitigkeit Möglichkeiten des Daseins würdig und sei auch schon in ihrer Kraft zu ersticken. Notice that error may refer to Zweitigkeit or to Möglichkeiten. Okay. So entangling ambiguity, hearsay, possibilities that were stifled in their power. So, right, exactly. Like, for instance, I only have a handful of people that I don't have to speak in ambiguity about the depths of where I'm at, right? because it's all about, a lot of people seem to not understand what it means to look at evil without being influenced by evil, right? It's like, like I have seen a plenty of horror films that I have enjoyed that I would never do any of the horrible things that would happen. And I'm imagining myself in those situations, and how do you hero that situation? How do you escape that situation? How do you survive that situation, et cetera, et cetera? And it's a mental exercise, and it's a nerve conditioning, right? You can also let your imagination go wild. You can also get locked up in fear with all that. Your nervous system can go crazy, right? If this kind of thing happens, what's up, dissident? When this kind of thing occurs, how come you got the moai, like the moai head and then the dove? Are you hailing from the Eastern Islands with peace? Is that what the meaning of that is? Cryptic, you're being very ambiguous. But anyway, but yeah, so it's very hard for me to directly convey a deep point about things, because, like, this is why I love a lot of things about the Asians, because the Asians, we speak backwards from the way they speak in Asia. Something really interesting happens when you cross that threshold into what we call the, quote, East, which is where, like, if you were to do a phrase-by-phrase translation of what they're saying in the East, it's typically backwards, right? This is Yoda speak in English, right? Yes, Merry Yuletide, my friend. And so, like, you're usually getting the point across before you're getting the subject of the point across, right? So, like, you can sit there and, let's just say that somebody doesn't like it, doesn't want to allow you to speak and say something along the line. No, I don't want to go with that example. It's a bad example. Huh. I'm sincerely trying to come up with an example which isn't deliberately controversial, because why just be controversial just all the time? I only just want to change it up only because I want to, because I've said it all before, so why just mull and repeating myself, obviously. So let's just say we're talking about okay, Saddam Hussein, right? Okay, I'll work with Saddam Hussein over here, right? Let's just say there's someone playing devil's advocate in 1988. Let's say it's 1988, and we don't have a tremendous amount of particular issue with Iraq, but or was it 80s? When did Kuwait? It was during the Bush administration. It was 89, right? Pretty sure it was 89. It was like 89 or 90. But anyway, because I think it corresponded with the fall of the Berlin Wall. Like, we had to, like, go and change things up in the Middle East because Saddam Hussein was not a necessary evil against the Soviets or something anymore, right? And so that's kind of part of the way we changed the world now that we didn't have to focus such proactive military forces on the Cold War, at least the public Cold War. Now we were in a shadow Cold War. And thus the proxy war of terrorism, which was part of various predications for various things. But at any rate, you see, the predicating argument that we really went to war about was the whole dog and pony show about the babies in the incubators being left to die on the floor. And it was like straight up some staffer's daughter or something giving that like testimony. So it was like an inside testimony, which means conflict of interest, right? Somebody who is going to be very empathically triggered by their belief in the reality that was alleged, because nobody, like everybody who went and showed evidence of legitimate scrutiny of this person's testimony, which the weight of war was being held on, right? History doesn't look back and say, well, we went to war because he was a monster who had babies dying on the floor with incubators, because eugenics and Hitler, right? So, Middle Eastern Hitler, and he's even got a mustache, folks. Don't you hate a guy that's got a mustache like that, too? Why has it just got to be this particular mustache? So they made another mustache illegal, culturally speaking, in the country. People were shaving their very Saddam Hussein-y type of mustache, right? Like they had to make that part of your psyche of fighting this war, right? Like Charlie Chaplin was the last man on the planet who could get away with having Hitler's mustache, right? He was the last guy. Nobody else, like, unless you're Charlie Chaplin, you're not allowed to have Hitler's grooming habits, which is strange. But then again, it was kind of common style of the day. Okay, I've lingered on this point forever. My apologies. But that's my point, right? It's that you have to then you're trying to like crack this shell of bringing up a higher truth without dismissing the person's feelings. And everyone knows that you can't say that it didn't happen, because there's still the possibility that it happened, even if the context is wrong, or at the very least, okay, it happened, but this is not a reason to go to war. It's a reason to not contribute to the prosperity of that nation, but that's not interesting to somebody who has got a mind for America or for their nation being the policeman of the world. We assume that if we don't hear that something bad is happening in the world, that people like especially these globally minded women in our world, they jump right the fuck on every little thing. And they, and America is gotta go and make the whole fucking world straight. And then we got to have all these enemies about it. And then we got to fucking spend the money to defend ourselves from the enemies we make from not minding our own business, so we can live in a world that's in alignment with your ideologies. All because somebody we love cried to us about it and said, please go risk your lives for us. And then you're asking me to go risk my lives for people that have little to do with over here, if anything at all. Just because you don't want to see the balance of power get tipped because all of a sudden the Russian Federation turns into a new Russian empire. Some sort of business-like empire because you'll still be a president or something. I don't know. I don't know what these people are precisely thinking, right? Other than being intolerant of the values of another culture, right? That may be a more conservative culture than they like, and it intimidates them. And does it intimidate you because you want to be weak, and thus you need to make everybody weak so you can rationalize feeling safe being a weak person, right? Because I know that there's this whole, it's funny how the people that want us to go to war are also the same people that want us to be weak. This goes for mainstream conservatives too, who don't put enough emphasis into the right way to be strong and healthy and independent. I ain't got it all right, but I'm fucking getting there. I'm getting there real nicely. I ain't got a fucking complaint in the world right now. So now I've finally gotten that out. So let's do this. Even supposing that what they have surmised and sent it out should someday be actually translated into deeds, ambiguity has already taken care that interest in what has been realized will promptly die away. Indeed, this interest persists in a kind of curiosity and idle talk, only so long as there is a possibility of a non-committal, just surmising with the someone else, being in on it with someone, das nicht dabei sein, when one is on the scent, and so long as one is on it, precludes one's allegiance when what has been surmised gets carried out. For in such a case, Dasein is in every case forced back on itself. Idle talk and curiosity lose their power and are already exacting their penalty. All right, nothing important there. Penalty. When confronted with the carrying through of what they have surmised together, idle talk readily establishes that they could have done that too, for they have indeed surmised it together. In the end, idle talk is even indignant that what it has surmised and constantly demanded now actually happens. In that case, indeed, the opportunity to keep on surmising has been snatched away. Right, the way of kind of settling the argument in its superficial, shallow interpretation. But when Dasein goes in for something in the reticence of carrying it through or even of genuinely breaking down on it, its time is a different time and, as seen by the public, an essentially slower time than that of idle talk, which lives at a faster rate. Idle talk will thus long since have gone on to something else, which is currently the very newest thing. That which was earlier surmise and has now been carried through has come too late if one looks at that which is newest. Idle talk and curiosity take care in their ambiguity to ensure that what is genuinely and newly created is out of date as soon as it emerges before the public. Such a new creation can become free in its positive possibilities only if the idle talk which covers it up has become ineffective and if the common interest has died away. In the ambiguity of the way things have been publicly interpreted, talking about things ahead of the game and making surmises about them curiously gets passed off as what is really happening, while taking action and carrying something through gets stamped as something merely subsequent and unimportant. Thus, Dasein's understanding in the they is constantly going wrong. Sich in its projects as regards the genuine possibilities of being. Dasein is always ambiguously there, that is to say, in that public discloseness of being with one another, where the loudest Idle talk and the most ingenious curiosity keep things moving, or in an everyday manner, everything and at bottom nothing is happening. This ambiguity is always tossing to curiosity, which it seeks, and it gives idle talk the semblance of having everything decided in it. But this kind of being of the disclosedness of being in the world dominates also being with one another as such. The other is proximately there in terms of what they have heard about him, what they say in their talk about him, and what they know about him, into primordial being with one another. Idle talk first slips itself in between. Everyone keeps his eye on the others first and next, watching how he will comport himself and what he will say in reply. Being with one another in the they is by no means an indifferent side-by-sideness in which everything has been settled, but rather an intent, ambiguous watching of one another, a secret and reciprocal listening in, under the mask of for one another and against one another is in play. In this connection, we must notice that ambiguity does not first arise from aiming explicitly at disguise or distortion, and that it is not something which the individual Dasein first conjures up. It is already implied in being with one another as thrown being with one another in a world. Publicly, however, it is quite hidden, and they will always defend themselves against the interpretation of the kind of being which belongs to the way things have been interpreted by the they, lest it should prove correct. This is how a conspiracy theory protects itself from disclosure. This is exactly where this happens, where it comes from, how it happens. Let's see. Snowboard solstice Yule orgasm day. Dig in how phenomenal this catching the scent of being there is described. Perhaps New Year resolution will include describing new spell crit like smells. Describing news spell crit like smells. Okay. Elaborate a little bit on that, Snowboard Solstice. Interesting. Welcome to the stream. Curious as a new commenter in the chats. How long you've been paying attention to me, and where'd you find out about me? I like to know these things. If you don't want to share it publicly, send me a DM somewhere. Pheromones. Yeah. Sure thing. Pheromones make sense. All right. It would be misunderstanding if we were to seek to have the explication of these phenomena confirmed by looking to the they for agreement. The phenomena of idle talk, curiosity, and ambiguity have been set forth in such a manner as to indicate that they are already interconnected in their being. We must now grasp in an existential, ontological manner the kind of being which belongs to this interconnection. Oh, okay. All right, from the spiders. Well, thank you so much for being here. That means a lot considering the circumstances by which I left them. The basic kind of being which belongs to everydayness is to be understood within the horizons of those structures of Dasein's being which have been hitherto obtained. So then next we're going into falling and thrownness. Hold on a moment. I'm going to open up the tab here. Where is that? 38? Where's 38? There's 38. Oh, okay. So then, let's see, 220, 226. Is that right? Okay. All right. Whoops. Okay. Good. There. Let me just resize that. We're in good shape. All right. Falling and thrownness. So I should be able to bang through these 6 pages. Excited about thrownness read because I prefer growness. Growness. Alrighty. Let me take a swig Idle talk, curiosity, and ambiguity characterize the way in which, in an everyday manner, Dasein is its there, the disclosedness of being in the world. As definite existential characteristics, these are not present at hand in Dasein, but help to make up its being. In these and in the way they are interconnected in their being, there is revealed a basic kind of being which belongs to everydayness. We call this the falling of Dasein. Verfallen. And then see our notes about it. Okay, verfallen. I like that. Verfallen. That sounds so cool. I want to use that in the name of something. Anyway. This term does not express any negative evaluation, but is used to signify that Dasein is proximally and for the most part alongside the world of its concern. This absorption in Aufgabe has mostly the character of being lost in the publicness of the they. Dasein has, in the first instance, fallen away, abgefallen, from itself as an authentic potentiality for being itself, and has fallen into the, quote, world, unquote. Let's see what it says here about that. Und in die Welt verfallen. While we shall follow English idioms by translating en die Welt as into the world, in contexts such as this, the preposition into is hardly the correct one. The idea is rather that of falling at the world or collapsing against it. That's rather that of falling at the world. It's very apropos. You're losing your battle with Jormungandr, okay? This is the world serpent crushing you. He is tapping into the psyche of Jormungandr, the psyche of the constricting status quo that is keeping you out of is keeping you in your box. When you are, you step out into the world and you step into the box of the serpent. When you are alone or in your world, you can expand yourself within those limits, right? And you have that freedom. Like, here in the confines of my channel and all things I choose to do here at home, I can do all this kind of stuff, and it's much freer than how I express myself at work. Right. I may keep the content of my thoughts to myself, but the expression of my thoughts, I kind of wear forward. I keep those thoughts to myself because they just don't have a place in the public workplace. Right. And that's because that place is confounded with all of these things that we were just discussing in the prior chapter. All right, so let's get back to this. Where was world? Hold on a second, because that's fallen world. There we go. Fallenness into the world means an absorption in being with one another, insofar as the latter is guided by idle talk, curiosity, and ambiguity, through the interpretation of falling, what we have called the inauthenticity of Dasein. The inauthenticity of Dasein, I can understand that, may now be defined more precisely. So what you're talking about here is when you've got a projected imprint over your world of a misconstruement of what the world really is. This is the conflation of the Matrix, if you will, right? Changing the window dressing, changing the manner in which the buildings look and everything. Dark City, right? Dark City, you're rearranging the mechanisms of things while people sleep. It's a very Mandela effect kind of movie. Anyway, let's see. Okay, may now be more precise. On no account, however, do the terms inauthentic and non-authentic signify really not, as if in this mode of being, Dasein were altogether to lose its being. In authenticity does not mean anything like being no longer in the world, but amounts rather to a quite distinctive kind of being in the world, the kind of which is completely fascinated by the world and by the Dasein of others in the they. Right, this is the compulsion of belonging to an in-group, right, to being part of a culture, right? It's just like, what is the kind of zeitgeist of New York City, right? What is a New Yorker's baseline, right? There's a baseline of the New York world, which you can't really define in simple words, and you couldn't even write a page that kind of defines this common ground that is going to be for everybody living the New York life experience. I'm talking about the boroughs outside of Manhattan, too, here. Even more precisely, because there's probably more people outside of Manhattan than in Manhattan. So, no account over authentic signify really not. So what does that mean? Okay. We'll be reading number 3. We don't have to read number 2. Okay. As if in this mode of being, Dasein were altogether to lose its being. Inauthenticity does not mean anything like being no longer in the world. Okay, I'm sorry, I read all that. Others in the they, not being itself. Das Nicht-Es-Selbstsein functions as a positive possibility of that entity which in its essential concern is absorbed in a world. This kind of not being has to be conceived as that kind of being which is closest to Dasein, in which Dasein maintains itself for the most part. Yeah, so, worlds as such, just like it's the difference between the culture of people that go to a gun convention versus people that go to a comic book convention. At a gun convention, you meet a lot of people with self-control, emotional stability, maturity, all sorts of government credentials, like your registration to own the things that convention is about, as opposed to comic book convention, which is childish fantasy. Childish fantasy that, if you look hard enough, you can find some sophisticated adult gems, but you have to really zero in on it. And you have to ask yourself, is it serving a constructive purpose in telling you a story that really makes things better? So let me see here. Snowboard says, grownness less random in conceptualizing origin and intention of manifestation than throwness of littering, etc. Nature grows itself, not throws. We are grown, not thrown, etc. Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay. So neither must we take the fallenness of Dasein as a fall from a purer and higher primal status. Not only do we lack any experience of this ontically, but ontologically we lack any possibility or clues for interpreting it. In falling, Dasein itself as factical being in the world is something from which it has already fallen away, and it has not fallen into some entity which it comes upon for the first time in the course of its being, or even one which it has not come upon at all. It has fallen into the world, which itself belongs to its being. Falling is a definite existential characteristic of Dasein itself. It makes no assertion about Dasein as something present at hand or about present at hand relations to entities from which Dasein is descended. or with which Dasein has subsequently wound up in some sort of commercium. We would also misunderstand the ontological existential structure of falling. This would be die ontologisch existential Struktur des Verfallens. The words des Verfallens do not appear in the earlier editions. All right. Neither in our first allusions to being in the world. Neither in our first allusions to being in the world as Dasein's basic state. Actually, you know what? We're going to take a break right here. It takes a lot, 6 pages doesn't seem like a lot. And then 15 minutes go by, right? And I need another break. So the top of this page here is an excellent point to pick up from. And then we will get to the end of this chapter in the next segment. So I want you guys to enjoy taking the high road. let that run a second to see if there's an ad that I have to skip. Thought there'd be more ads. I'm always pleasantly surprised when there aren't any ads. Let's see, does an ad show up for this one? Nope, no it doesn't. All right, good. Pinch it back a little bit. That should be right at the 0 mark. Okay, good. All right, we're lined up. Excellent. Let me see. Oh, thank you. You're figuring out commercium. Thank you, Snowboard Solstice. Equals a legal term relating to ancient Roman law. The term refers to the general rule that the law of community was for the members of that community only, that the stranger was without rights. Right. Yeah, which many people, right, like commercium, like that sounds like a conservative principle, right? You know, if we're saying that strangers don't have rights, right? So commercium is something that you would be seeing invoked by people that believe in border security. Because the same people that believe in border security, they want people to have their legal immigration papers in order, right? They are here by privilege, not by right, right? They have a different relationship with employment status than a U.S. citizen does. That's the way that they want it to be. It's allegedly the way it's written in law. But then again, the law is written with all these little outs for people to have freedom, but it doesn't seem like that's real freedom, because it's freedom without rights. What good is freedom without your rights, right? And you know, there's a whole conversation about how that shit works on the sovereign citizen level, and then a lot of people just say no way to sovereign citizen. You know, and you know, a lot of conservatives will say, yeah, sovereign citizen, but then they're too fucking patriotic for their own good and realize they're giving the state too much power. And then some people, they want to give the state that much power. It's a bit bonkers. It's just a bit bonkers. But anyway, let's carry on and try to get to the end of this chapter, because the end of this chapter is also the end of this section, and I get a lot of energy. I may want to keep going. Neither in our first allusion to being in the world as Dasein's basic state, nor in our characterization of its constitutive structural items, did we go beyond an analysis of the constitution of this kind of being and take note of its character as a phenomenon. We have indeed described concern and solicitude as the possible basic kinds of being in, but we did not discuss the question of the everyday kind of being of these ways in which one may be. We also show that being in is something quite different from a mere confrontation, whether by way of observation or by way of action. That is, it is not the being present at hand together of a subject and an object. Nevertheless, it must still have seemed that being in the world has the function of a rigid framework within which Dasein's possible ways of comporting itself towards its world run their course without touching the framework itself as regards its being. But this supposed framework itself helps make up the kind of being which is Dasein's. An existential mode of being in the world is documented in the phenomenon of falling. Idle talk discloses to Dasein a being towards its world, towards others, and towards itself, a being in which these are understood, but in a mode of groundless floating. Curiosity discloses everything and anything, yet in such a way that being in is everywhere and nowhere. Ambiguity hides nothing from Dasein's understanding, but only in order that being in the world should be suppressed in this uprooted everywhere and nowhere. By elucidating ontologically the kind of being belongs to everyday being in the world as it shows through in these phenomena, we first arrive at an existential adequate determination of Dasein's basic state, which is the structure that shows us the movement of falling. Idle talk and the way things have been publicly interpreted, which idle talk includes, constitutes themselves in being with one another. Idle talk is not something present at hand for itself within the world as a product detached from being with one another, and it is just as far from letting itself be volatilized to something universal, which, because it belongs essentially to nobody, is really nothing and occurs as real only in the individual Dasein which speaks. Idle talk is the kind of being that belongs to being with one another, and it is just as far from letting itself be volatilized to something universal, which, because it belongs essentially to nobody, is really nothing and occurs as real only in the individual Dasein which speaks. Idle talk is the kind of being that belongs to being with one another itself. It does not first arise through certain circumstances which have effects upon Dasein from outside. But if Dasein itself, in idle talk and in the way things have been publicly interpreted, presents to itself the possibility of losing itself in the they and falling into groundlessness, this tells us that Dasein prepares for itself a constant temptation towards falling. Being in the world is in itself tempting. Versucherisch. So yeah, that's getting right into the whole bit. Yeah, like I said, the Matrix before, like, this is the Maya, the illusion of the world, right? You know, the delusion, the delusion, the most important thing you got to understand is that although there is a force, and that force is not just a sea of individuals, but it's also the fact that it's a common thread in the strength of the media and everything else, that there is an entire conversation and argument going on. And there wants to be this essence in the world of an unspoken understanding that we do not speak of such certain things, we do not entertain certain things, and we will even meet you with violence to silence you because of your ability to influence in ways that also we believe pervert reality, right? Because what you're doing is that you're trying to put something into the deluge or delusion of your mind, of the mind of the world, right? You're trying to have the world accept this rejected aspect of it. So this is very similar to things I'm going to be talking about in my Loki conversation with Slick Dissident, which we'll be working on. I got to get through season 2 again to be in my prime state, but I'm getting pretty, like there's been enough on my mind about it where I'm getting pretty much there. Let's see. Snowboard says Yuletime request. If after this chapter you have time, energy, as a Norse newbie curious about symbols of your body art and how you determine which ways to celebrate 12 days Yule, because online varying dates. Oh, right. Listen, varying dates. It's up to you how you want to have a relationship with that. Oh, I'm sorry. This thing's been running on silent the whole time. Okay, there we go. All right. Yeah, I'll see. Yeah, look, I mean, I'll tell you straight up right now. It's just, I look in the mirror, I just do my flow state thing, and I pick forms that feel right. It's all intuitive. It's all emotionally, relevant, or relative or whatever to me. and it's just me. It's not an appropriation of anybody's anything. It might be loosely based on some Norse face art that I have seen. But this is just me experimenting with doing the craft on my face as such. Thank you for the question. All right. Since the way in which things have been publicly interpreted has already become a temptation to itself in this manner, it holds Dasein fast in its fallenness. Idle talk and ambiguity have seen everything, having understood everything, developed the supposition that Dasein's disclosedness, which is so available and so prevalent, can guarantee to Dasein that all the possibilities of its being will be secure, genuine, and full through the self-certainty and decidedness of the they. It gets spread abroad increasingly that there is no need of authentic understanding or the state of mind that goes with it. The supposition of the they, that one is leading and sustaining a full, genuine life, brings Dasein a tranquility for which everything is in the best of order and all doors are open. Falling, being in the world which tempts itself, is at the same time tranquilizing. Beruhigend. Yeah, you're welcome. However, this tranquility in inauthentic being does not seduce one into stagnation and inactivity, but drives one into uninhibited hustle, betriebs. Being fallen into the world does not now somehow come to rest. The tempting tranquilization aggravates the falling. With special regard to the interpretation of Dasein, the opinion may now arise that understanding the most alien cultures and synthesizing them with one's own may lead to Dasein becoming, for the first time, thoroughly and genuinely enlightened about itself. Versatile curiosity and restlessly knowing it all masquerade as a universal understanding of Dasein, but at bottom it remains indefinite what is really to be understood, and the question has not even been asked, nor has it been understood that understanding itself is a potentiality for being which must be made free in one's own most Dasein alone. This is the individuation process, bringing your true, authentic world into your mind. When Dasein When Dasein tranquilized and understanding everything thus compares itself with everything, it drifts along towards an alienation, an Entfremdung, in which its own most potentiality for being is hidden from it. Falling, being in the world, is not only tempting and tranquilizing, it is at the same time alienating. And isn't that interesting? Once you become in the world, you become alienated. You would think the opposite were true, right? Because to me, it often feels that way, right? You know, like I explained earlier in my little I don't know if Snowboard was here for it. Dissident may have been here for it, but a little bit earlier, I went on a diatribe. I spoke names. I spoke names of people that don't talk to me anymore. And I have determined that they don't like me. And I spoke their names tonight. Yet this alienation cannot mean that Dasein gets fractally torn away from itself. On the contrary, this alienation drives it into a kind of being which borders on the most exaggerated self-dissection, tempting itself with all possibilities of explanation, so that the very characterologies and typologies which it has brought about, Divan Gizek we follow the difficilio lectio of the earlier editions. The newer editions have Divan Irgizaiten, which it has shown. Okay. All right. So, which has brought about our themselves already becoming something that cannot be surveyed at a glance. This alienation closes off from Dasein its authenticity and possibility, even if only the possibility of genuinely foundering. It does not, however, surrender Dasein to an entity, which Dasein itself is not, but forces it into its inauthenticity, into a possible kind of being of itself, the alienation of falling, at once tempting and tranquilizing, leads by its own movement to Dasein's getting entangled, verfangt, in itself. This is what happened to people who immediately obeyed 2020. That's what happened to people. Right. This wasn't even roll call. I was like in the middle of the read. I brought it up because it was relevant in my flow state. The phenomena we have pointed out, temptation, tranquilizing, alienation, and self-entanglement, or entanglement, characterize a specific kind of being which belongs to falling. This movement of Dasein in its own being we call its downward plunge, absturs. Dasein plunges out of itself, into the groundlessness and nullity of inauthentic everydayness. But this plunge remains hidden from Dasein by the way things have been publicly interpreted, so much so, indeed, that it gets interpreted as a way of ascending and living concretely. Man, now I go to the gym, it's just like part of my gym experience is I'm hitting the treadmill because sometimes I just don't want to jog outside because it's just too cold or whatever. And so I was on the treadmill, and so I see on mute what's on the televisions while I'm listening to other things on my phone. And looking at what's on TV, right? Like what's on TV frames things in a certain way to pretty much make you avoid talking about it if you don't want to agree with the preposition of the whole thing, right? If you don't agree with the basic assumption of certain things, like the way the headline is phrased and the tone of voice of the people reporting on it, then you are going against that world, right? And you may feel compelled to want to say something about it, but then you also know there's a price to be paid from backlash that may not be worth it, because it's not even an appropriate forum to have to make a constructive moment out of the discourse, right? And the world needs a little less personal Uranus disruption in their life. It needs more of Uranus breaking things on the macro level. Uranus on the individual level, we need a lot less of that right now. It was necessary through 2021 because of the world imposing itself upon people that would have otherwise respected their wishes, right? Tough times, and there was a way of making you seem like the evil one no matter what. Whether you would agree that the other side's argument for why you doing the opposite of what they do is evil or not. Isn't this satanic adversary essence concept so much fun? Isn't it so much fun just to completely just go jumping back and forth between adversary this and adversary that? Anyway. This downward plunge into the within, the groundlessness of the inauthentic being of the they, has a kind of motion which constantly tears the understanding away from the projecting of authentic possibilities and into the tranquilized supposition that it possesses everything or that everything is within its reach. Since the understanding is thus constantly torn away from authenticity and into the they, though always with a sham of authenticity, the movement of falling is characterized by turbulence. Wirbel. Falling is not only existentially determinative for being in the world. At the same time, turbulence makes manifest that the thrownness which can obtrude itself upon Dasein in its state of mind has the character of throwing and of movement. The thrownness is neither a fact that is finished nor a fact that is settled. All right. Dasein's facticity is such that as long as it is what it is, Dasein remains in the throw and is sucked into the turbulence of the they's inauthenticity. Thrownness, in which facticity let itself be seen phenomenally, belongs to Dasein, for which in its being that very being is an issue. Dasein exists factically. But now that falling has been exhibited, have we not set forth a phenomenon which speaks directly against the definition we have used in indicating the formal idea of existence? Can Dasein be conceived as an entity for which in its being, its potentiality for being is an issue? If this entity in its very everydayness has lost itself and in falling lives away from itself, but falling into the world would be phenomenal evidence against the existentiality of Dasein only if Dasein were regarded as an isolated I or subject as a self-point from which it moves away. In that case, the world would be an object. Falling into the world would then have to be interpreted ontologically as being present at hand in the manner of an entity within the world. If, however, we keep in mind that Dasein's being is in the state of being in the world, as we have already pointed out, then it becomes manifest that falling as a kind of being of this being in affords us rather the most elemental evidence for Dasein's existentiality. In falling, nothing other than our potentiality for being in world is the issue. Even if in the mode of inauthenticity, Dasein can fall only because being in the world, understandingly with a state of mind, is an issue for it. On the other hand, authentic existence is not something which floats above falling everydayness. Existentiality is only a modified way in which such everydayness is seized upon. The phenomenon of falling does not give us something like a night view of Dasein, a property which occurs ontically and may serve to round out the innocuous aspects of this entity. Falling reveals an essential ontological structure of Dasein itself. Far from determining its nocturnal side, it constitutes all Dasein's days in their everydayness. It follows that our existential ontological interpretation makes no such ontical assertion about the corruption of human nature, not because the necessary evidence is lacking, but because the problematic of this interpretation is prior to any assertion about corruption or incorruption. Falling is conceived ontologically as a kind of motion. Ontically, we have not decided whether man is drunk with sin and in the status corruptionis, whether he walks in the status integratis, or whether he finds himself in an intermediate stage, the status gratia, the status gratia? I think it's gratia. But insofar as any faith or worldview makes any such assertions, and if it asserts anything about Dasein as being in the world, it must come back to the existential structures which we have set forth, provided that its assertions are to make a claim to conceptual understanding. The leading question of this chapter has been about being of there. Our theme has been the ontological constitution of the disclosedness, which essentially belongs to Dasein. The being of that disclosedness is constituted by states of mind. Understanding the discourse, its everyday kind of being is characterized by idle talk, curiosity, and ambiguity. These show us the movement of falling with temptation, tranquilizing, alienation, and entanglement as its essential characteristics. But with this analysis, the whole existential constitution of Dasein has been laid bare in its principal features, and we have obtained the phenomenal ground for a comprehensive interpretation of Dasein's being as care. And there we are. Excellent. Okay. You know what? I'm still feeling a little spry. Let me take a quick look here at okay, so here's 39, right? So then if I go 39 to where's 40? 40 is right there. So that's 228. What is that? 228. So that's pretty short, isn't it? All right. Okay. When we get back from break, I'm going to take us into chapter 39. And then I may call it right there, but that's 3 pages. So that won't take very long. And what the heck? I'm having fun, right? is. Excellent. Let's put that there. Let that run for a second. Find out if there's an ad that I'm going to have to skip. All right. It's nice when I'm prepared to skip an ab. An ab. I never skip abs. An ad. All right. Should be fine. All right. That should be good. Right there. Excellent. Okay. 3 more pages. Whoops. All right. Care as the being of Dasein. So this will be very interesting because as one who loves the work of Mark Passio, the conception of dark care is something that I noticed, right? So this will probably be very helpful in having that dissection of looking at the world of different kinds of care. That's what my imagination of this of this section is going to be. So 39. The question of the primordial totality of Dasein's structural whole. Ooh, I like that. This is getting deep. Being in the world is a structure which is primordially and constantly whole. In the preceding chapters, Division 1, chapters 2 through 5, this structure has been elucidated phenomenally as a whole and also in its constitutive items, though always in this basis, the preliminary glance which we have gave to the whole of this phenomenon in the beginning. I think that's the annotation. Let me take a look at the bottom of the page. No. Okay, there is no annotation on this page. It's just that must be just a comma of some sort, or a quote, or whatever. Anyway, has now lost the emptiness of our first general sketch of it. To be sure, the constitution of the structural whole and its everyday kind of being is phenomenally so manifold that it can easily obstruct our looking at the whole as some phenomenologically in a way which is unified. But we may look at it more freely, and our unified view of it may be held in readiness more securely if we now raise the question towards which we have been working in our preparatory fundamental analysis of Dasein in general. How is the totality of that structural whole which we have pointed out to be defined in an existential ontological manner? Dasein exists factically. We shall inquire whether existentiality and facticity have an ontological unity, or whether facticity belongs essentially to existentiality, because Dasein essentially has a state of mind belonging to it. Dasein has a kind of being in which it is brought before itself and becomes disclosed to itself in its thrownness. But thrownness, as a kind of being, belongs to an entity which in each case is itself possibilities, and is them in such a way that it understands itself in these possibilities and in terms of them, projecting itself upon them, being alongside the ready to hand, belongs just as primordially to being in the world as does being with others, and being in the world is in each case for the sake of itself. The self, however, is proximally and for the most part inauthentic. The they self being in the world is always fallen. Accordingly, Dasein's average everydayness can be defined as being in the world, which is falling and disclosed, thrown and projecting, and for which its own most potentiality for being is an issue, both in its being alongside the world and its being with others. Right? This is why Bruce Wayne, Superman, and such, they got this whole alter ego thing, right? They can't really function in the regular world. Superman has a whole unrelatability of having family from another planet, having traveled the universe, having traveled through time, right? He's been to all sorts of different places to be and times to be in reality. That the average person can't appreciate the level of which Superman is doing things all over the place in the backdrop of the universe to protect Earth. And then Batman understands the depths of the way people are exploited and abused and deceived in this world. And his workings in the background does all that clean up corruption thing, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, he is possibly destroyed people that you love, appreciate, and respect. And Batman has to take that heat, so Bruce Wayne doesn't. And then Bruce Wayne has to live in a different world than the Batman. Right? That's part of how it works. And so when you're following the superhero, most of the peoples that the superhero is protecting, they got no idea, right? Like, this is like with the X-Men, right? It's just like the X-Men, Professor Xavier's lot is you have to be the better man and protect those that are afraid of you. You have to show them that you're compassionate and nothing to be afraid of. As opposed to the Brotherhood of Mutants, which is just like, dude, these people are always going to be a threat to us. They're always going to be scared. It's better to be strong and take control in your own right and understand that we are inevitable and there shouldn't be a eugenics program against us. And granted, Professor X doesn't believe in the eugenics program either, but what is certain is that Professor X is the type of guy who would allow the eugenics program to happen and then do something about it, where the Brotherhood of Mutants is just very proactive about it. It makes all of those of the Brotherhood side very sympathetic villains because they are fighting to protect mutants. And they've chosen to indifferentiate themselves from the world, as opposed to the X-Men, who are fighting to demonstrate that they can be trusted and approved of, which is still extraordinarily problematic, right? Like the X-Men made the original storytelling in the comic books for Marvel's Civil War make 20 times more sense. I mean, the cinematic universe didn't even get a chance to start tapping into the Inhumans, to use the Inhumans as the proxy mutants, which was a direction they were trying to go, but dropped the ball horribly. But anyway, can we succeed in grasping this structural whole of Dasein's everydayness in its totality? Can Dasein's being be brought out in such a unitary manner that in terms of its essential equiprimordiality, I love that word, the equiprimordiality. I'm going to put that into some black metal lyrics somewhere. Of the structures we have pointed out, or a technical death metal, as well as their existential possibilities of modification, will become intelligible. Does our present approach via the existential analytic provide us an avenue of arriving at this being phenomenally? To put it negatively, it is beyond question that the totality of the structural whole is not to be reached by building it up out of elements. For this, we would need an architect's plan, the being of Dasein upon which the structural whole as such is ontologically supported becomes accessible to us when we look all the way through this whole to a single, primordially unitary phenomenon which is already in the whole in such a way that it provides the ontological foundation for each structural item in its structural possibility. Thus, we cannot interpret this comprehensively by a process of gathering up what we have hitherto gained and taking it all together. The question of Dasein's basic existential character is essentially different from that of the being of something present at hand. Our everyday environmental experiencing, Erfahren, which remains directed both ontically and ontologically towards entities within the world, is not the sort of thing which can present Dasein in an ontically primordial manner for ontological analysis. Similarly, our immanent perception of experiences, Erlebnissen, fails to provide a clue which is ontologically adequate. On the other hand, Dasein's being is not to be deduced from an idea of man. Does the interpretation of Dasein, which we have hitherto given, permit us to infer what Dasein, from its own standpoint, demands as the only appropriate ontological way of access to itself? An understanding of being belongs to Dasein's ontological structure as something that is seind. It is disclosed to itself in its being. The kind of being which belongs to this disclosedness is constituted by state of mind and understanding. Is there in Dasein an understanding state of mind in which Dasein has been disclosed to itself in some distinctive way? If the existential analytic of Dasein is to retain clarity in principle as to its function and fundamental ontology, then in order to master its provisional task of exhibiting Dasein's being, it must seek for one of the most far-reaching and most primordial possibilities of disclosure, one that lies in Dasein itself. The way of disclosure in which Dasein brings itself before itself must be sure that in it Dasein becomes accessible as simplified in a certain manner, with what is thus disclosed. The structural totality of the being we seek must then come to light in an elemental way. As a state of mind which will satisfy these methodological requirements, the phenomenon of anxiety. What do we got here for angst? While this word has generally been translated as anxiety in the post-Freudian psychological literature, it appears as dread in the translations of Kierkegaard and in a number of discussions of Heidegger. In some ways, uneasiness or malaise would be more appropriate still. So that's interesting. So anxiety then kind of goes to dread, but uneasiness and malaise don't really feel anything like anxiety or dread. I hardly even consider them degrees of each other. I think you can be anxious and uneasy as two distinct different feelings, right? Malaise is, I don't know the exact definition of the word malaise, but it's kind of like boring, right? Boring, maybe painfully boring, I suppose. Anywho, the phenomenon of anxiety will be made basic for our analysis. In working out this basic state of mind and characterizing ontologically what is disclosed in it as such, we shall take the phenomenon of falling as our point of departure and distinguish anxiety from the kind of phenomenon of fear which we have analyzed earlier as one of Dasein's possibilities of being. Anxiety, together with Dasein itself as disclosed in it, provides the phenomenal basis for explicitly grasping Dasein's primordial totality of being. Let's see. Ennui, noun, a feeling of weariness and dissatisfaction. Boredom. Yeah. Okay, I get that for sure. Dasein's being reveals itself as care. If we are to work out this basic existential phenomenon, we must distinguish it from phenomenon which might be proximally identified with care, such as will wish, addiction, and urge. Okay, nothing important there. Care cannot be derived from these, since they themselves are founded upon it. Like every ontological analysis, the ontological interpretation of Dasein as care, with whatever we may gain from such an interpretation, lies far from what is accessible to the pre-ontological understanding of being, or even to our ontical acquaintance with entities. It is not surpassing that when the common understanding has regard to that with which it has only ontical familiarity. That which is known ontologically seems rather strange to it. In spite of this, even the ontical approach with which we have tried to interpret Dasein ontologically as care may appear far-fetched and theoretically contrived. To say nothing of the act of violence one might discern in our setting aside the confirmed traditional definition of man. Accordingly, our existential interpretation of Dasein as care requires pre-ontological confirmation. This lies in demonstrating that no sooner has Dasein expressed anything about itself to itself than it has already interpreted itself as care, cura, even though it has done so only pre-ontologically. The analytic of Dasein, which is proceeding towards the phenomenon of care, is to prepare the way for the problematic of fundamental ontology, the question of the meaning of being in general, in order that we may turn our glance explicitly upon this in the light of what we have gained and go beyond the special task of an existentially a priori anthropology. We must look back and get a more penetrating grasp of the phenomena which are most intimately connected with our leading question, the question of being. These phenomena are those very ways of being which we have been hitherto explained, readiness to hand and presence at hand, as attributes of entities within the world whose character is not that of Dasein. This should be the last page. Because the ontological problematic of being has heretofore been understood primarily in the sense of presence at hand, reality, world actually, while the nature of Dasein's being has remained ontologically undetermined, we need to discuss the ontological interconnections of care, worldhood, readiness to hand, and presence at hand, reality. This will lead to a more precise characterization of the concept of reality in the context of a discussion of the epistemological question oriented by this idea which have been raised in realism and idealism. Idealism versus realism. Excellent ground to touch upon. Entities are quite independently of the experience by which they are disclosed, an acquaintance in which they are discovered, and the grasping in which their nature is ascertained. But being is only in the understanding of those entities to whose being something like an understanding of being belongs. Hence, being can be something unconceptualized, but it never completely fails to be understood. In ontological problematics, being and truth have, from time immemorial, been brought together, if not entirely identified. This is evidence that there is a necessary connection between being and understanding, even if it may perhaps be hidden in its primordial grounds. If we are to give an adequate preparation for the question of being, phenomenon of truth must be ontologically clarified. This will be accomplished in the first instance on the basis of what we have gained in our foregoing interpretation in connection with the phenomena of disclosedness and discoveredness, interpretation and assertion. Thus, our preparatory fundamental analysis of Dasein will conclude with the following themes: the basic state of mind of anxiety as a distinctive way in which Dasein is disclosed, Dasein's being as care, the confirmation of the existential interpretation of Dasein as care in terms of Dasein's pre-ontological way of interpreting itself, and Dasein's worldhood and reality, Dasein disclosedness and truth. So here he just outlines the next 5 sections that he's going to discuss, 40 through 44, which maybe, if it's not too long to get through all that, next session I'll try and bang out all 5 of those. I doubt it. We'll probably bang out 2 or 3. We'll see how it goes. All right, so, oh man, this was an excellent session. I cranked out so much. I got to the end of a whole section and moved on into the next. I'm in the 40s now. We're much closer to the end of this book. I am ultra excited about that. Snowboard Solstice, thank you so much for participating in the chat and adding tremendous value to the discussion here in Being and Time. Dissident Jones, thank you for popping by earlier. Anybody who may have been quietly listening, thank you so much for checking me out. Please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification, and you can also check me out on social media, in which I am usually going to link things when I'm going to be doing them. I have a tendency to not really give a tremendous amount of notice unless it's a major premiere production. Then you'll probably get ample notice, that kind of thing. So I will catch you guys later. Oh, I am sorry. I had to interrupt that for a second. I have to open and close the show with the horn. I have to get into the habit of my rituals, don't I? Okay, there we go. Now you can leave.